Gabrielle Giffords. On January 8, 2011, a routine Congress on Your Corner event outside a Safeway in Tucson turned into one of the darkest moments in modern U.S. politics. Democratic Representative Gabrielle "Gabby" Giffords was greeting constituents when a gunman opened fire at point-blank range. 6 people were killed, including federal judge John Roll and a 9-year-old child, while 13 others were wounded. Giffords herself was shot in the head but miraculously survived. The shooter, 22-year-old Jared Lee Loughner, was tackled and disarmed at the scene. His writings and behavior revealed deep mental illness, along with anti-government resentment. The attack rattled the nation, sparking fierce debates over political rhetoric, mental health care, and gun laws. President Barack Obama called it a tragedy for our country. In 2012, Loughner pled guilty to 19 counts of murder and attempted murder to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. Giffords went on a long and painful road to recovery, later becoming one of America's most powerful voices for gun safety. Congressional baseball practice shooting. Early on June 14, 2017, Republican lawmakers gathered at Eugene Simpson Stadium Park in Alexandria, Virginia, to practice for the annual Congressional baseball game. Suddenly, 66-year-old James T. Hodgkinson opened fire with a rifle. House Majority Whip Steve Scalise was struck in the hip and fell on the field, while 2 Capitol police officers and 2 staffers were also wounded. The attack turned a quiet morning into a battlefield. Capitol Police, already present as Scalise's security detail, engaged Hodgkinson in a gunfight that lasted nearly 10 minutes. The shooter was mortally wounded. Investigations revealed Hodgkinson harbored deep anger toward Republicans, fueled by online rants and a history of political extremism. The FBI classified the attack as domestic terrorism. Scalise nearly died from blood loss, but endured multiple surgeries and months of recovery. He triumphantly returned to Congress later that year, greeted with a standing ovation. The incident heightened awareness about political violence targeting lawmakers, and many members of Congress increased their personal security. Donald Trump. On July 13, 2024, a campaign rally for former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, erupted in chaos. As Trump addressed thousands of supporters, gunfire rang out. 1 spectator was killed, 2 others were wounded, and Trump himself was grazed in the ear before Secret Service agents rushed him off stage. Images of a bloodied Trump pumping his fist spread worldwide within minutes. Authorities identified the shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who was killed by return fire from Secret Service snipers. Investigators have yet to publicly confirm his motive, but the FBI and Homeland Security classified it as an assassination attempt on a major political figure. The attack stunned the nation, coming just months before the presidential election. The rally shooting reignited heated debates about political polarization and security for high-profile figures. Trump vowed to continue his campaign stronger than ever, framing the survival as both personal resilience and political symbolism. U.S. Capitol attack. On January 6, 2021, chaos engulfed Washington, D.C. as thousands of rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol, attempting to block the certification of Joe Biden's presidential victory. Lawmakers were evacuated, Vice President Mike Pence was rushed to safety, and a joint session of Congress was forced into lockdown. The violent breach left 5 people dead and more than 140 officers injured, marking one of the darkest days in American democracy. The crowd, many waving Trump flags and wearing tactical gear, smashed windows, forced open doors, and overran police barricades. The FBI and Department of Justice later described it as the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history. Security footage, social media posts, and body cam videos became evidence in hundreds of federal prosecutions. Dozens of rioters were linked to extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. As of 2025, more than 1,500 people have been charged with crimes ranging from trespassing to seditious conspiracy. High-profile convictions have included militia leaders receiving lengthy prison terms. The attack forever altered the perception of security at the Capitol and deepened political divisions in the United States. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could show support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Paul Pelosi assault. In the early hours of October 28, 2022, political violence reached the home of one of America's most powerful lawmakers. David DePape, armed with a hammer and zip ties, broke into the San Francisco residence of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. His target was the Speaker herself, but instead, he encountered her husband, Paul Pelosi. DePape bludgeoned Paul in the head, fracturing his skull, before police subdued him inside the home. Investigators revealed DePape had been radicalized by conspiracy theories, including QAnon-style narratives and election lies. His goal, according to prosecutors, was to kidnap Speaker Pelosi and break her kneecaps to send a political message. The brutal assault highlighted how online disinformation and political extremism can drive real-world violence against officials and their families. In 2024, DePape was convicted in federal court of attempted kidnapping of a U.S. official and assault. He received a 30-year prison sentence, ensuring he will spend decades behind bars. Charlottesville car attack. What began as a rally called Unite the Right on August 12, 2017, spiraled into deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. White supremacists and counter-protesters clashed in the streets, and by midday, the unthinkable happened. A car plowed into a crowd of peaceful demonstrators. 20-year-old James Alex Fields Jr., a neo-Nazi sympathizer, killed 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injured dozens more. The attack was captured on video, shocking the nation and the world. President Trump's response, saying there was blame on many sides, triggered a political firestorm. Federal prosecutors charged Fields with hate crimes, emphasizing his documented history of racist ideology and his intent to target a multiracial crowd. In 2019, Fields pled guilty to 29 federal hate crime charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison. Assassination of Dr. George Tiller. On May 31, 2009, one of America's most prominent abortion providers, Dr. George Tiller, was assassinated inside his church in Wichita, Kansas. As Tiller served as an usher during Sunday services, anti-abortion extremist Scott Roeder stepped forward and shot him point-blank in the head. The killing ended years of threats and attacks against Tiller, who had become a lightning rod for extremists due to his work providing late-term abortions. The murder was immediately condemned by national leaders. President Obama called it an abhorrent act of violence. For reproductive rights activists, it was a devastating loss. For extremists, it was celebrated in underground circles. The assassination underscored the violent extremes of the abortion debate and heightened security concerns at clinics nationwide. In 2010, Scott Roeder was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 50 years. The assassination remains one of the starkest examples of political violence tied to abortion in modern U.S. history, cementing Tiller's legacy as both a healer and a target of extremism. Tree of Life Synagogue Massacre. On October 27, 2018, the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history unfolded inside the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. Armed with an AR-15 and handguns, 46-year-old Robert Bowers stormed Shabbat services, shouting anti-Jewish slurs as he opened fire. 11 worshippers were killed and 6 others, including police officers, were wounded in the carnage. Investigators later revealed that Bowers had posted hateful rants online, targeting Jews and refugees. The FBI classified the massacre as a hate crime and an act of domestic terrorism. Survivors described hiding in closets and hearing the gunman shout, "All Jews must die." The attack devastated the Jewish community nationwide and sparked global outrage. In 2023, after years of legal proceedings, Bowers was convicted on all 63 federal counts, including hate crimes resulting in death. He was sentenced to death, making it the first federal death penalty case under the Biden administration. The massacre reinforced the rising threat of extremist violence in America's houses of worship. El Paso Walmart shooting. On August 3, 2019, a Saturday morning shopping trip in El Paso turned into one of the deadliest hate crimes in U.S. history. A gunman armed with a semi-automatic rifle entered a Walmart near the Cielo Vista Mall and opened fire, targeting Latino shoppers. Within minutes, 23 people were killed and more than 24 others injured. The horror was amplified by a racist manifesto the shooter posted online shortly before the attack. The shooter, 21-year-old Patrick Crucius, surrendered to police and admitted he had driven hundreds of miles with the intent to stop a Hispanic invasion. Federal prosecutors classified the massacre as domestic terrorism and a hate crime, calling it one of the most chilling examples of racially motivated violence in modern America. The FBI and DOJ tied the manifesto to the attack, confirming the ideological motive. In February 2023, Crusius pled guilty to 90 federal hate crime and firearms charges. He was sentenced to 90 consecutive life terms without parole. State prosecutors later secured an additional plea deal, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The attack left El Paso scarred, but also galvanized calls to address domestic terrorism and extremist propaganda online. Charleston church shooting. On the evening of June 17, 2015, a Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church, one of the oldest black churches in the South, became the scene of a racially motivated massacre. Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old white supremacist, sat quietly through nearly an hour of worship before pulling out a handgun and executing 9 parishioners, including senior pastor and state senator Clementa Pinckney. Roof's writings and online postings revealed an obsession with racist ideology and Confederate imagery. The attack shocked the nation and reignited debates over hate groups, gun laws, and Confederate symbols. President Obama delivered the eulogy at Pinckney's funeral, famously singing Amazing Grace in tribute to the victims. The massacre pushed South Carolina lawmakers to finally remove the Confederate battle flag from the State House grounds. In 2017, Roof was convicted of 33 federal hate crime charges and sentenced to death, the first federal death penalty imposed for a hate crime. The sentence was upheld on appeal in 2021. Roof remains on federal death row, unrepentant and unapologetic, while Mother Emanuel stands as both a place of worship and a symbol of resilience against hate. Oak Creek Sikh Temple shooting. On August 5, 2012, worshippers at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin gathered for Sunday services when gunfire erupted. Wade Michael Page, a 40-year-old U.S. Army veteran with ties to white supremacist groups, stormed the temple with a 9mm handgun. He killed 6 people on site, wounded 4 others, including a responding police officer, and left a 7th victim in a coma who later died of his injuries in 2020. The attack shocked the Sikh community across the United States, highlighting the vulnerability of religious minorities. The FBI investigated the massacre as an act of domestic terrorism motivated by racial and religious hatred. Survivors recalled acts of bravery. Some hid children, while others attempted to confront the gunman before he turned his weapon on himself after being shot by police. In the aftermath, federal and state officials pledged stronger efforts against hate crimes. The Oak Creek tragedy marked one of the earliest major acts of domestic extremist violence targeting a house of worship in the 21st century. Buffalo supermarket shooting. On May 14, 2022, a quiet Saturday afternoon in Buffalo turned into a massacre when Peyton Gendron, an 18-year-old white supremacist, opened fire at a Tops supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood. Wearing tactical gear and live streaming the attack, he shot 13 people, killing 10. The victims were targeted specifically because of their race, making it one of the deadliest racially motivated shootings in recent U.S. history. Investigators uncovered a racist manifesto citing the Great Replacement conspiracy theory. The FBI quickly classified the attack as a hate crime and an act of domestic terrorism. Survivors described the horror of hiding in aisles as the gunman methodically sought out victims. The brutality shocked the country and reignited debates over radicalization online and extremist violence. In 2023, the shooter pled guilty in New York State Court to murder and terrorism charges, receiving life without parole. A federal hate crime conviction followed, with prosecutors pursuing the death penalty. Planned Parenthood shooting. On November 27, 2015, terror struck a Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado Springs when 57-year-old Robert L. Deere Jr. stormed the facility armed with rifles and handguns. He killed 3 people, including a police officer, and wounded 9 others in a standoff that lasted 5 hours. Deere told investigators he was motivated by opposition to abortion, turning the attack into a flashpoint in America's culture wars. The FBI classified the assault as domestic terrorism, while prosecutors charged Deere with murder, attempted murder, and federal offenses related to targeting a healthcare facility. However, the case has been stalled for years due to Deere being repeatedly found mentally incompetent to stand trial. Courts recently authorized forced medication in an effort to move the prosecution forward. For Planned Parenthood and reproductive rights advocates, the attack symbolized the very real dangers faced by providers and patients. For law enforcement, it highlighted the persistent threat of lone wolf extremists motivated by ideology. The victims are remembered for their courage, including Officer Garrett Swayze, who rushed in to protect others and paid with his life. Boston Marathon bombing. Patriots' Day, April 15, 2013, began as a celebration of sport and city pride but ended in terror. 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 spectators, including an 8-year-old boy, and injuring more than 260 others. The blasts sent runners and fans scrambling as smoke filled Boylston Street in one of the worst terror attacks on U.S. soil since 9/11. The FBI launched an unprecedented manhunt, quickly identifying brothers Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev as suspects. Days later, a violent shootout in Watertown left Tamerlan dead, while Dzhokhar was captured hiding in a boat. Evidence revealed they were radicalized by extremist propaganda, with motives tied to U.S. foreign policy and jihadist ideology. In 2015, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was convicted on 30 federal counts, including using a weapon of mass destruction, and sentenced to death. After years of appeals, the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated his death sentence in 2022. San Bernardino attack. On December 2, 2015, a holiday party at the Inland Regional Center in San Bernardino turned into a nightmare. Syed Rizwan Farouk, a county employee, and his wife, Tashfeen Malik, entered the gathering armed with rifles and opened fire. 14 people were killed and 21 wounded in what became one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in California's history. The couple fled but were killed hours later in a shootout with police. Investigations revealed Malik had pledged allegiance to ISIS on Facebook, while both had been radicalized online. The FBI labeled the massacre an act of terrorism, and it sparked heated debate over encryption after the Bureau clashed with Apple over unlocking the shooter's iPhone. The San Bernardino attack highlighted the evolving threat of homegrown terrorism inspired by foreign groups, but executed by US-based actors. It also placed a national spotlight on how extremist ideologies spread through social media and how law enforcement adapts to such evolving threats. 2001 Anthrax attacks. Just weeks after the 9/11 attacks, America was struck by another wave of terror, this time through the mail. Beginning in mid-September 2001, letters laced with anthrax spores were sent to media outlets and U.S. senators, killing 5 people and sickening 17 others. Offices in Washington, New York, and Florida were contaminated, triggering nationwide panic about bioterrorism. The FBI launched a massive investigation dubbed Amerithrax. After years of tracing spores, reviewing lab access, and interrogating suspects, investigators concluded that Dr. Bruce Ivins, a government microbiologist at Fort Detrick, was responsible. Ivins died by suicide in 2008 as the FBI closed in, leaving questions but convincing evidence linking him to the mailings. The anthrax attacks exposed vulnerabilities in America's biosecurity and postal system. They also forced Congress to rush billions into biodefense programs. Even decades later, Amerithrax remains one of the most complex and unsettling investigations in FBI history. Austin IRS plane attack. On February 18, 2010, office workers at an IRS building in Austin, Texas, were blindsided by a fiery crash. Joseph Stack, a 53-year-old software engineer furious over tax disputes, deliberately flew his small Piper Dakota airplane into the 7-story building. The explosion ignited a massive fire, killing 1 IRS employee and injuring 13 others, while Stack himself died on impact. Authorities later discovered a manifesto Stack posted online railing against the IRS, government corruption, and economic inequality. It was quickly classified as a suicide attack driven by anti-government rage. Emergency crews rushed to evacuate survivors as flames engulfed the building, and federal agents scrambled to assess whether more attacks might follow. The crash forced Congress to re-examine domestic extremism motivated by personal grievances rather than organized networks. Las Vegas anti-government ambush. On June 8, 2014, Las Vegas shoppers were stunned when two self-proclaimed anti-government extremists launched a brazen ambush. Jared and Amanda Miller first executed two police officers as they ate lunch at a pizza restaurant. The couple then stormed into a nearby Walmart, killing a bystander before engaging in a firefight with responding officers. The rampage left 5 dead, including the attackers, who died in a shootout. The Millers draped a Gadsden flag, a symbol often used by anti-government extremists, over one of the slain officers and declared their actions part of a revolution. Investigators later revealed their links to militia movements and white supremacist ideology. The FBI categorized the massacre as domestic terrorism rooted in anti-government extremism. The ambush highlighted the growing threat posed by radicalized sovereign citizens and extremist couples acting as self-contained cells. It also raised concerns about how online conspiracy theories were fueling real-world violence. Dallas police ambush. On the night of July 7, 2016, a peaceful protest in Dallas turned deadly when a gunman launched one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in U.S. history. Micah Johnson, a 25-year-old Army veteran, ambushed police officers patrolling a Black Lives Matter march. Over the course of the attack, 5 officers were killed and 9 others wounded, along with 2 civilians. Johnson used tactical maneuvers to outflank officers, creating chaos in downtown Dallas. He told negotiators he wanted to kill white police officers in retaliation for police shootings of black men across the country. After hours of a standoff, Dallas police used a bomb disposal robot rigged with explosives to kill Johnson, the first use of such a tactic in U.S. policing. The ambush shook the nation and ignited debates over race, policing, and domestic extremism. It also exposed how quickly political protests could become targets for violence. Poway synagogue shooting. On April 27, 2019, the last day of Passover, a gunman stormed the Chabad of Poway synagogue near San Diego. Armed with an AR-style rifle, 19-year-old John T. Ernest opened fire during services. One woman, Lori Gilbert Kay, was killed while protecting her rabbi, and 3 others, including an 8-year-old girl, were wounded before the gunman's weapon jammed and he fled. Ernest had posted a manifesto online hours earlier, filled with anti-Semitic and white supremacist rhetoric, echoing similar hate seen in attacks in Pittsburgh and New Zealand. He later admitted he wanted to inspire more acts of terror. Witnesses recalled congregants throwing themselves over children to shield them from bullets, acts of bravery that saved lives in the chaos. In 2021, Ernest pled guilty to state murder and attempted murder charges, receiving life without parole. He also admitted to federal hate crime charges and was sentenced to life plus 30 years. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.